Hello, class. Welcome to Lesson 14 of our Counting on Grace unit. Today I am going to read chapters 28, 29, and 30. Again, we are reading Counting on Grace by Elizabeth Winthrop. Let's begin. Chapter 28, Troubles. When I tell Miss Leslie what Mr. Dupree said to me over the store counter, she shrugs. What can he do to me? But this worried look flashes across her face, as if she's trying to figure her way backward to something she might have forgot. Arthur sits in the corner reading one book after another. I can't write down your life if you don't tell me nothing, I say to him. What does Mr. Hine care about my life, he snaps, or yours? Arthur, learning to write with your left hand will take practice, says Miss Leslie. What good's writing gonna do me? Miss Leslie never let him talk this way to her before, but ever since his fingers got cut off, she seems confused about what to say to him. I'm not. Just 'cause you can't do something perfect right off, you're not gonna even try? I ask him. Lucky you never had to doff with the wrong hand all along. You're lucky you got two whole hands to doff with. You did too, I spit back. Grace, says Miss Leslie. Silence falls down on the room. Even when the truth ain't pretty, I still got to speak it. At least Arthur don't bolt. He just squinches down even lower in his seat. Feels to me like Arthur's accident broke him into two people, the boy before and the one after. He always had a smart tongue, but he weren't so closed down inside himself the way he is these days. Now he sits in the corner and reads like a rat chewing through feed. No pleasure in it. He just don't know what else to do with himself. I never did show him the picture of him and me, side by side. It don't feel safe. He'd likely go and rip that one up, considering what he thinks about Mr. Hine. And I'm not letting nobody take that picture away from me. No letter come for Mrs. Trottier, so time's running out on her again. We all bought her stores that one time, but we can't keep on with it. Besides, she told me she's not taking food from her neighbors again without paying them back for the first. And how's she going to do that? These days my mind jumps so quick from one trouble to the next. It feels like a whole row going down at once, and I've got to scurry along and piece up all the ends that are flying around every which way. Only thing that concentrates my brain is writing our life history. I'm all the way through Arthur's life and halfway done with mine. Maybe Mr. Hine don't care a thing about us no more, like Arthur says, but it give me something to do. Once it's done and corrected, Miss Leslie says she'll send it to Mr. Hine to show to his committee. She sits at her desk getting the lessons ready for the next week. Arthur chews on his books and I write. The weather's cooling down already, halfway into September. It's quiet in the schoolroom. Every so often when I ask Miss Leslie how to spell a certain word, she speaks out the letters without looking up from her work. I pretend that this is my real job, sitting in the quiet, writing all day without having to run my feet off chasing bobbins. Before I hear any steps, a shadow moves across the slant of light in the doorway behind me. I must be going deaf from 6 days a week in the spinning room. Good afternoon, Madame Forcier, says Miss Leslie, staring right over my head. Mimere, here? I don't look up or turn around. I come for Arthur. His mother needs him. I see you brought my book. If you're all done with it, I could lend you another. I can read all the words in this one now, she says. You didn't tell me that, I say, whipping around. I've been studying on my own at night, she says, not paying me no mind, with no help. I turn back to my work while Miss Leslie goes through the pile of books on her desk. This is the level 2 reader, she says, handing over the green one. Henry's on number 4, but it won't be long before you catch up with him. My mare takes the book and peers at the front cover. She handles it careful like it might break if she drops it. Why don't you look around? Miss Leslie says. It won't bother any of us. I just come to tell Arthur his mother's looking for him, my mare says. But I can see her starting around the room. Her fingers trail across the bookshelf, then up over the blackboard. Miss Leslie jumps up and writes Madame Forcier on the board. You try it, she says, holding out the piece of chalk. She ain't learned the writing yet, just the letters, I say quick. I might as well be a desk for all the notice they pay me. Try the F. My mother picks up the chalk, turns it round and round in her fingers, and then sniffs it. Her first line down the board makes a nasty squeak, and she jumps back as if something bit her. Slant it a little, says Miss Leslie. She does know how to make the letter F, and then the O. She's just puzzling over the R with Miss Leslie on the side, waiting for her to work it out when we hear more steps. Mr. Wilson and then Mr. Dupree push their way into the schoolroom, both of them trying to fit through the door at once. What's going on here? Barks Mr. Wilson. Extra lessons, says Miss Leslie. There are 2 pink spots, one on each of her cheeks. No rules against that as far as I know, Mr. Wilson. I close my notebook up quick and slide it away, out of sight. Arthur can't get no lower in his corner. My mother steps away from the board and slaps her hands once or twice the way she does on baking day to dust off the bread flour. Where's the boy? Mr. Wilson says. Over there, says Mr. Dupree, who's been poking around all the time he's been in the room. Who give him permission? Boy, you go on out of here now, Mr. Wilson orders. You and your mother are moving on. Where? I ask, but they don't look at me. That's why I come down here, my mother says to Arthur, to fetch you. That's not true. My mare never went to fetch nobody. She would have sent Henry or Delia, or me if I'd been around. Arthur was just an excuse so she could get that next reader from Miss Leslie. Did my mother get her letter? Arthur asks, standing up. There's no mail on Sunday, Arthur, I want to tell him, but I keep quiet. I don't know about any letters, son, says Mr. Wilson. All I know is your mother says she won't let you work in the mill, not even as a sweeper. That means you two are moving along. Time you give up the house for some real workers, way past time. You can't do that, says Miss Leslie in her sure voice. You can't throw people out as if they're nothing but trash. They've been warned and warned, miss. They've got to be out by tomorrow. New family coming in on the train. Arthur is making his way through the desk slowly. He looks at me, but we don't say nothing out loud with our mouths. It's finally happened, his eyes say. Where will you go? My eyes ask. He don't have no answer. I'll go along with you, Arthur, Miss Leslie says, moving to catch up with him. I want to speak to your mother. But Mr. Wilson hooks her by the arm as she tries to pass him by. Not so quick, miss. I've got business with you, too. Then suddenly I know what Mr. Dupree is doing here, sneaking around the corners of the room, looking at us out of the sides of his eyes. Miss Leslie didn't do nothing wrong, I cry. You leave her alone. And I go for Mr. Wilson, but my mare grabs me as I fly by and pulls me right up close against her. Who is that girl? Mr. Wilson asks. Miss Leslie has stood off from him. Take her out, she says to my mother in a low voice. Go on, quickly. Grace, you keep quiet for once, you hear? I'll talk to you later. Tais-toi, my mother spits in my ear. She has strong muscles in her hands from years of cranking up the builder. Her fingers are wrapped so tight around the top of my arm that I'll be showing a bruise by morning. That's the way we go up French Hill, her dragging me along behind like I'm nothing but some cart bumping over the rocks. We're all the way inside the kitchen before she finally lets me go. What is it? Papa says. They're throwing the Trottiers out, says my mother. I warned that woman and warned her again. The boy could have done the sweeping, and Grace here was fixin' to kill the overseer. I don't say nothing. All I know is I've got to see Arthur before he goes. Chapter 29. Goodbye. Nobody tries to stop me when I say I'm going to the Trottiers. My father nods and my mother says, Take her this. She hands me a sack with a loaf of bread and some sausage. It's not much, but they'll need food for the trip. Wherever she's going. I'm staring at my mare. Get along with you, Grace, she snaps. They'll be halfway down French Hill by the time you get there. At the last minute, I decide to take the picture of me and Arthur standing together, so I can show it to him. I won't let him touch it. but he needs to see himself whole again. This is what you look like, Arthur. 2 fingers don't matter much. You still got everything else. They're collected at the front door of their house, sharing out the bundles. 2 people can't carry much between them. Arthur's got a sack over his shoulder, and I can tell it's all books from the way the corners of them are poking at the burlap, just like they're fighting to get out and get read. Miss Leslie's been here, he says the moment he sees me. Hello, Grace, says Mrs. Trottier. My mother sent you this. I hand over the sack. Food for the trip. She is kind. I won't be able to pay everybody back, she says with a fussing look on her face. We'll do without, I say. Miss Leslie give us the train fare as far as New Hampshire. We're going to find Mr. Trottier's cousin. Miss Leslie's leaving too, says Arthur. Mr. Wilson threw her out because she brought in Mr. Hine. You're lying, I spit, but inside myself I know it's true. The minute I saw snaky Mr. Dupree sliding around the edges of our classroom, I knew what he was there for. How is it that whole months can go by with nothing changing, and then in this one day I'm losing Arthur, and Miss Leslie, and my Sunday schooling? But I know I've got to stop the thinking about all that right now, because Arthur and Mrs. Trottier are lifting their bundles and there's not much time. I've got something to show you, I tell him. I'll go on ahead, Mrs. Trottier says. Train's not due for an hour. You take care of yourself, Grace. She puts her bundles down again and pulls me against her, so my nose is smashed right into the old mill smell, caught up in the cloth of her gray dress, and the envelope I'm holding is pressed between us. Then just as quick she lets me go and starts down the hill. Bon voyage, Madame Trottier, I call after her, and she waves one free hand, her body still leaning forward away from French Hill and this old mill house where nothing much good ever happened to her. I lead Arthur back inside the kitchen. Someone else will be sleeping in here tomorrow night. I can stand Arthur not being in the mill with me, back to back sliding down the rows between our frames. I'm used to missing his eyes watching me between the spindles on cleaning day. But now, even on Sundays, there's going to be a huge hole where Arthur and Miss Leslie used to be, like the hole Pepe left in the corner of our kitchen. And that one's still not filled. How many people do I got to give up? What you brought to show me? He asks. I can't wait no more. The light is fading and the lantern on the table is empty of kerosene. I slide the photograph out, keeping a safe distance from him. Mr. Hines sent me this picture, I tell him. You and me. He just looks and looks like he can't believe that's him staring back. I know what he's looking at. That whole complete hand of his hanging off the pocket of his overalls. Same ones he's wearing now. I thought you should see yourself like this before you leave. He reaches out to take it, but I yank it away quick. No touching. Mamere ripped up my other one. Why'd she do that? I shrug. She don't want people seeing me in my mill smock. You look like you're fixin' to fight someone, he says. It's only 2 fingers, Arthur. You still got everything else. For once, he don't give no smart answers. He just keeps on looking like he's trying to make the picture stay in his brain. And right then and there, before I can change my mind, I decide to give him his half. You got your knife? He nods. Get it out, I order, and I lay the picture flat on the table. What are you fixin' to do? Watch me. I fold the paper and slit it down the middle. We're still side by side, but now there's a line dividing us. It gives me an ache to see that. Here, take it, I tell him, holding out his half. How about I take you and you keep me, he says, so's we don't forget. I know what he means, and for a second I think he's right. We could hold on to each other that way. But then I shake my head. I won't forget what you look like, I say. But now I've got me. I can't let go. I can't. And you need to do that too. He don't argue, but takes the picture of his old cocky self and slides it between the pages of one of those books of his. I put my half back in the envelope, and I know the goodbye is coming right at us, and I'd just as soon jump over it. Don't miss your train, I say, and start up the hill to my house because my throat is shutting down like it's choked with lint. I'll write you a letter, he shouts, with my left hand. You better, I shout back. My voice croaks. But I don't let myself turn around and look at him one more time. I'm practicing keeping the picture of him in my head. Chapter 30. Miss Leslie. Not letting yourself cry is a lot of work. It tires me out, and now I just want to slip through the back window of our house and curl up in bed next to Delia. I lean through and drop my envelope down behind the bureau. The lantern's still lit in the kitchen, and there are people talking around the table. I slip along the edge of the porch to listen. Seems Miss Leslie has marched herself up French Hill one more time. It's not enough, my mother is saying. Cuts her pay by 50 cents a week. I've told you all this before, Mrs. Forcier. Miss Leslie's voice sounds dull and tired. You know how I feel about Grace's schooling. I've given up all my free Sundays to come in and teach her along with Arthur. I won't be here anymore, and you can be sure the next teacher won't be bothering. A teacher can make as much as $20 a week. This would give her a real chance to get out of the mill. What chance? I ask, stepping through the door. The three of them look up at me, but it's Henry's voice from the corner that speaks first. She wants you to be the teacher. Well, not the teacher exactly, Henry, says Miss Leslie. A substitute just until the new one comes. The pay would be $2 a week for now. I got Mr. Wilson to agree to offer you the position temporarily. He was in such a rush to fire me, he hadn't figured out who would be coming to take my place. It'll be a month or two before you find someone. You could be teacher till then. Meanwhile, you could be studying for the normal school exam. We can't give up the extra money now, says my mare, standing up to make herself more sure of what she's saying. Just when we're getting caught up. Papa has his old job back, I say. Imagine being a teacher. Me. Even for a little while. Delia is leaning against the doorframe of our room. Grace ain't such a good doffer, ma mare. When I open my mouth to snap at her, I catch her wink. Valerie's fast. With Mrs. Trottier gone, Valerie could take Grace's place on your frames. No, says Papa. He rarely speaks up, but this time he backs my mother. We are grateful to you, miss, but Grace works in the mill as a doffer. That's her job. If she were to come out of there, we might lose this house. But don't you see, Miss Leslie cries, Grace would still be working for the mill owners. Remember, they own the school and run it, and pay the teachers. There's a little silence while she gets to her feet. I give up, she says with a shrug. Me and Henry have heard her say that before in the classroom, but this time she sounds like she really means it. I'm sick and tired of wanting more for your children than you people want for them yourselves. I'm done. Will we have school tomorrow? Henry asks. He wants to go so he can show off the new shoes Mère bought him yesterday at the store. His first pair ever. I don't expect so, Henry, Miss Leslie says. Nobody to teach you. I'll be gone by noon. Where will you go? I ask. I have a sister who works in the mills down in North Adams, right across the border in Massachusetts. Pierre Alain's sister lives in a convent in North Adams. Miss Leslie nods. I'll move in with my sister and her husband for now. Who knows, Grace? Maybe I'll be doffing myself before long. No doffin down in that mill, miss, my father says. It's called Arnold Print Works. It's where our cloth goes to be printed. The way she stares at my father, I can see she didn't hear a word he said. Her eyes are getting all shiny. I don't know who she feels saddest about, me, or her, or Arthur, or the whole collection of us that spent so many Sundays huddled round those desks together. The train whistle blows. There goes Arthur, I say, looking at her. Walk me down the hill, she says, holding out her hand. I'm too big to be holding somebody's hand, but I take hers. Grace, you got that laundry downstairs to hang out, my mother says, but I pretend I don't hear her. Goodbye, Mrs. Forcier, says Miss Leslie. I hope you're able to keep up your reading. You too, Henry. Thank you, miss, my father says, but we don't look at him. Suddenly, I don't like the family God give me. Me and Miss Leslie walk out the door together. If we started running right then, I bet we could make it onto Arthur's train. But I know I can't twist together a new family the way I make cotton thread from a bunch of flying ends. Miss Leslie has her sister. Arthur and his mother got each other. I can't make them stay with me. At the bottom of the hill, she pulls my notebook out of her bag. You put that somewhere safe. I hug it up close to me. I give Arthur a picture Mr. Hine made of him. It shows him with both his fingers. What will become of Arthur? She asks out loud, but I know she's not expecting me to come up with the answer. She's talking to God, or the wind, or the trees. He should have gone to Massachusetts. You said they don't let kids like us work in the mills down there. I told Mrs. Trottier that, but she is so sure that this cousin is going to help them. He lives in Manchester, New Hampshire. How far away is that? I ask. Other side of Vermont and then north. The Coolidge mill in that town has got one of the biggest spinning rooms in the world. Arthur and his mother are going from the frying pan into the fire. I don't know what she's talking about, and she can tell. She give herself a little shake. Grace, I tucked Mr. Hine's address in the front of your notebook. When you finish your life story, you find a way to get it to him. But don't you mail it from here, not with Mr. Dupree watching everything you do. You wouldn't be leaving if Mr. Hine had never come. You're right, Grace. Sometimes people trying to do good can make trouble all their own without thinking. I never should have pushed Arthur as hard as I did. I don't have no answer for that. Did you read my book? I asked. I did. Your handwriting's clear enough even though the letters lean the wrong way. I open my mouth, but she goes right on. I marked the spelling errors and corrected the grammar. I wait for more. Finally it comes. You've got your own particular writing style, Grace. It sounds just like you. Is that bad? She smiles a little. No, it's fine. Did Mr. Wilson really say I could be the teacher? A substitute, just until he finds someone else. It would be a start for you. She shivers as if suddenly she's cold. Then she takes me by the shoulders. But it's for your mother and father to say. Don't get foolish ideas in your head, Grace, the way Arthur did. You pay attention to those bobbins, you hear me? I say yes, but I don't intend to. Off I go then. Her voice sounds brisk the way it always did when she was ordering me to sit back down at my desk. Arthur says he'll write to me. Letters got us into this trouble in the first place, she says. But I'm the only one left behind, I shout, and it snatches the top off the bottle of tears that I thought were all stopped inside me. She hunches down in front of me and tries wiping them away, fast as they come. I expect the ink off her fingers is leaving black streaks on my face. I know, Grace, she says. I'll write. I'll promise. Seems to me that crying scares her as much as me, because suddenly she tucks some scrunched up piece of paper in my smock pocket, and she's gone, scrambling down the last bit of the hill to the main road. I watch long as I can, but the dark rubs out the sight of her in her blue dress before she even turns the corner. When I get home, I unfold the paper and read it by the light of a candle. It tells me her address in North Adams. So she do mean to write her. So she do mean me to write her. Delia is sprawled across the whole bed. Even though she don't wake up, her body knows to move over and make room for me when I slide under the blanket. And that's our reading for today. Make a great day, everyone.